coming up on today's Next Fan Up podcast.
Well, look, if he has any more steel in his lower extremities, he's going to be the $6 million man. That's just wrong, man.
When did he pass?
Years ago, guy.
Are you serious?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Oh, this is terrible. Wait a second. No, he has
sorry,
not.
I'm wrong.
You got the wrong little man, James. It's the NFL Conference Championships. Here we go.
That's how we start. Yeah, baby.
32 super fans.
Where do the reports come from? Did you get an initial?
One PodVader.
That's football.
Every angle of the NFL covered.
All that kind of stuff, I get it.
This,
no question about it,
is Next Fan Up.
We're going to unleash hell here in December.
Hello and welcome to the Conference Championship edition of the Next Fan Up podcast. Hey everybody, PodVader here. I can tell you this week's podcast is not going to be 2.5 hours long. I say that, famous last words, but I feel pretty confident about it because it's just me and James, the Eagles superfan, here with you today. Hello, James.
Hey, Pod. Conference championships, great time of year. Four wonderful teams, actually. But I didn't think that all four of these teams would be here. One of these teams is the ball-headed stepchild because I never thought they'd make it this far. The other three, predictable.
So we'll get into a little bit about that when we start breaking down some of these matchups. But it's interesting because you mentioned three teams weren't supposed to be here. And at the beginning of the season, we didn't think three of these teams were going to be here. So
no, I thought three of these teams would be here.
Well,
one not so much.
Well, we'll talk about that in just a moment. But first, before we get into any of the game stuff, before we get into talking about the upcoming NFL draft, before we talk about the last head coach who was hired, and before we talk about some of the retirements and maybe even a little bit of the Hall of Fame BS that occurred over the last week, I got to tell you how to get in touch with us. And that's at nextfanup@gmail.com. Our guy, Paul in New Zealand, has written in and said, hey, Pod, you mentioned that the winner of the postseason pick'em would be invited onto the show. And just so you know, right now, that is Blue 10. He is crushing it in our playoff pick'em group with 21 points. Monty and No Dak Pirate are next with 17 points. Me and Tomahawk Chopo Face. Yeah, it's Chopo Face, not chop off your face. We follow with 14 points. Needless to say, I believe this week the most I can win is 9 points, which means I can't even catch blue number 10. So blue 10 is looking like they're going to be the winner of this. Paul is not going to be the winner of this because he says, how about inviting on the biggest loser? So far, I'm 0 for 6. Pretty consistent, eh? If I manage 0 for 11, I should at least get an honorable mention. Well, Paul, you just got your honorable mention. Stop copying Colin Cowherd's picks, and then you'll be better off.
Way to be perfect.
Yeah, exactly. I have a lot of things that I want to say about all of these teams. I'm going to save them for when we actually speak about these teams. We are joined by some of the other super fans. Oh, by the way, to continue how you can get in touch with us, at NextFanUp on I'm sorry, it's not at NextFanUp. It's at NFU Podcast on Twitter. I wish it was at NextFanUp. It would be so much easier to say, but it's at NFU Podcast on Twitter and Facebook.com/NFU Podcast on Facebook. So much to talk about with all of these games. It's unbelievable. And our super fans decided in their super fan battles that they too had a lot to say about these. So, James and I are going to go take a little nap while we have Jordan and Nick battle it out. It's the Titans at the Chiefs kicking off at 3:05 on CBS.
And in the AFC Championship game, we have the Kansas City Chiefs hosting the Tennessee Titans at Arrowhead for the Lamar Hunt Trophy. It is only the second time that trophy has entered the building in Kansas City and has yet to be actually won by the team that was the trophy, or the trophy founder's name is on it, all that kind of stuff. Chiefs certainly hoping that they're gonna, be able to keep it in the building this time. But Tennessee Titans and their super fan here, Jordan, wants to take it away from me.
That's right. I mean, we kind of feel like a team of destiny right now, the way the last couple of weeks have gone. So we certainly had some like weird, miraculous success against the Chiefs in the past few years. So this should be a good game. I mean, obviously the Chiefs are the favorite, but I think everyone kind of thinks this could go either way because we're very opposite teams right now.
Yeah, there's a lot to get to in this game. I honestly think it's the most interesting game of the two, not only because of the history of kind of the matchup, including a crazy game in the regular season, but as you said, I mean, it's almost like two opposing philosophies on offense going head-to-head against each other. But I mean, just touching upon that game, and I just went back to look at the ESPN box score on it and just trying to piece together, oh yeah, that's right, that wasn't an insane game. But one of my favorite little things that ESPN does is they have the little win probability chart, and that's always fun because you can kind of see the kind of swings back and forth in any given game. And the Chiefs, it was basically always on the Chiefs' side that entire game. The Chiefs always had like a small lead, but the Titans were always like right there behind them. But it got all the way up to 95.9% chance of the Chiefs winning with 1 minute and 21 seconds left in the fourth quarter of that game. Chiefs then miss a field goal. The Titans score and get a second 2-point conversion while down 5 to that point to go up 3. The Chiefs then miss another field goal and lose the game. I mean, and so it was just like the chart is like steadily going up for the Chiefs and then suddenly plummets to the Titans side and the Titans win. That was a truly insane game. Which, after the game that the Chiefs just played, in the last round of the playoffs, I don't think we can necessarily count out more insane things happening.
Yeah, and that was really like our first big win of the season. So it really got us going. And yeah, there were so many, not just score changes, but there were so many 60, 50-yard touchdowns going back and forth too. So there were giant explosive plays happening in that game. And it just in the fourth quarter alone, I think there were several, both teams scored and there were lead changes. So, I mean, I expect this game to be super high scoring, just like the previous game was. I think there's going to be no shortage of fireworks. Obviously, the Chiefs always provide their own fireworks, but then we have the smash mouth Derrick Henry to match up with that. So, yeah, I mean, anyone could really watch the replay of our last game, and if it's anywhere near as exciting as that one, then this is going to be a great game again on Sunday.
Well, and it's just such a crazy thing. I mean, you mentioned that the two teams have this kind of weird history in terms of games. I mean, so I don't know if you've heard this stat, but basically Andy Reid has beaten every team in the league at least twice, except for the Titans. For whatever reason, his record is 1-8 against the Titans. And at least lately, it's always been those kind of weird games where it's inexplicable. I mean, it's just I also get shades of the last time we met in the playoffs, which was just a couple of years back, the last year of Alex Smith. The Chiefs went up 21-0 and ended up losing 21-22. In a game with some weird calls. Mariota threw a pass to himself and ran in for a touchdown. I mean, it was just the football gods always try to make this game interesting, and it usually goes against the Chiefs.
Yeah, and I have heard that Andy Reid stat, which I like a lot. I mean, Andy Reid, everyone knows how good he is with that extra week to prepare, but he's not as good when it comes to conference championship games. So I'm hoping that plus his history against the Titans somehow works out in our favor. It's pretty random. But yeah, I think each of the last 3 times, there was the game this season, the playoff game, and then I think even a year before that, we had we scored and we were down by 1 and we went for 2 and we didn't get it, but then we somehow got the ball back and hit a game-winning field goal to beat you guys at the end. So the last 3 times we played, you guys had reached a point where you were you had a win locked up, but we somehow stole it in the end, which I like the trend, but it seemed like you were the better team probably maybe each of the times we played you, but somehow we've been able to steal it from you. This playoff run for the Titans, going to Foxborough, going to Baltimore, going to Kansas City, probably the 3 hardest places to play in the AFC. And it's also against the last 3 MVPs of the NFL. So it really couldn't be harder of a row. But at this point, it's I have no idea what this team is capable of because we've been at a whole nother level. The last game is something I've never seen before with how good our defense was, in addition to just how unstoppable Derrick Henry is. I don't know, maybe we should talk about some quick injury updates before we get into it, because I think the big one for the Chiefs is going to be Chris Jones, because obviously he would be big against the run with Henry and also just getting to the passer. I think he's like a huge part of your defense. Do you know what his status is looking like?
I do not. We're recording this on Wednesday, and the last I saw is that he basically didn't practice today. He was still on the sidelines nursing it, and it was a freak injury. It happened on like a Thursday practice last week where he strained his calf. Obviously, I think they'd like to get him out there. Maybe they're just kind of keeping him from re-aggravating it or whatever. But I mean, it's certainly not looking great if he's not doing the Wednesday practice for him to be on the field. And as you mentioned, I mean, that really is big. Although I kind of go back and forth on it because Chris Jones is a guy who is an absolute wrecker up the middle as a pass rusher. That thing that's very rare in this league, a guy that can just win immediately up the middle. But, he's actually not that great against the run, and they might actually be better disposed to having one of the, kind of doubling up with nose tackles, which they sometimes do on the line. And so he might have been a rotational guy in this game plan anyway, because the Titans tend to want to run it down opponents' throats and kind of throw when, the play action, makes sense and when the matchups dictate it.
Yeah, so what do you think? Because I think for the Chiefs defense, I feel like there's a perception out there that obviously people know how good their offense is, but people kind of look at them as maybe not a good defense. But I think it definitely has been pretty good the second half of the season. But obviously now Chris Jones, we don't know, and Juan Thornhill's out. So what are your kind of expectations for how their defense is going to play?
I think it has the reputation because everyone saw the Chiefs defense last year, which was truly terrible. And to start off the year this year, they weren't doing great either. But if you just kind of look at the stats from like the midpoint of the year on, they've basically been a top 10 defense since the midpoint of the season. And a big part of that has been, I think they loosened up the playbook on one hand, they loosened up the playbook for Tyrann Mathieu. And then Frank Clark finally got healthy. He had been dealing with a number of different issues the first half of the season. And those two guys were the two big acquisitions in the offseason. And now that they're actually like playing to the full height of their ability, they're both absolute game changers. And that is the one solace in not having Chris Jones is that you have Frank Clark now totally in it and playing the way that we hope he was going to play all year. Had 3 sacks last week. He's just a wrecker, never gives up on the play, moves all over the place. And Tyrann Mathieu, he was PFF's top-rated safety from the midpoint of the season on, and I think he's kind of a guy that people haven't talked about as much. I mean, everyone remembered his great years in Arizona, and he's sort of fallen out of the discussion for a while. But the Chiefs just use him everywhere, and they let him sort of use his instincts to do everything. There was some, and frequently what the Chiefs have basically learned to do is that they use every single part in the middle of their defense almost interchangeably. So they have slot corners dropping it back at safety. They have Tyrann Mathieu blitzing, playing the 2 different safety spots. They have a lot of backup safeties they'll throw on the field, taking up corner roles as well. They do all sorts of things, and frequently it'll be 3 different things within a single play. There was one great shot that someone threw up on Twitter where in a single play, Tyrann Mathieu fakes a blitz, drops back to cover Deshaun Watson's first read on the play, sees that he's not going there, actually runs to another zone of the field to jump in front of his second read. And then when Watson sees that everything's covered and starts scrambling, it's Tyrann Mathieu chases him out to the sideline for a sack, effectively for him having to go out of bounds. And so they're just letting him just run around. And it's been great. And that's been the thing that's been, I think, was definitely missing from the Chiefs defense last year. But right now, I mean, they're a defense that is never going to really show its cards. I mean, it's just hard to know what you're looking at as a quarterback on any given play. I think what I'm worried about it as a Chiefs fan is just that I'm not sure that necessarily matters a ton against the Titans. Is that, the Titans are a physical team with that great run blocking line and Derrick Henry. They want to impose their will on you. They're going to run straight at you, and they're going to push you off the ball. And to the extent that they're going to pass, it seems like, especially so far in the playoffs with Tannehill, well, once we know that you're terrified of the run and you're moving up assets, we're going to play action. And Ryan Tannehill is perfectly capable of throwing a few 30, 40-yard bombs on play action into single coverage a few times per game. We don't even need him to do that more than a few times per game for our game plan to be successful. And it's just one of those things. I mean, I think the Chiefs are going to be just